No, thank you.
Your change, though.
Thank you.
What time's your meeting?
About 10 minutes from now.
Oh, well, it's not far, is it?
No, it's just 5 minutes down the road by car.
Oh, you've still got your car?
No, my accountant is picking me up here.
Oh, I see.
Hi. Oh, hello.
See, I was right.
What about what?
Oh, nothing. Well, nothing in particular. Anyway, just we went round to your place to wish you luck. We weren't there and, well, said you might be in here.
Elsie said you wouldn't be.
Oh, well, perhaps I forgot to mention it to her. In fact, I'm meeting my accountant in here.
Oh, you ready?
Yes. Yes, join us for a drink.
Oh, no, we better be getting on.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for your good wishes.
Sounds as if he needs them, doesn't he?
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could just have a word before the other side get here. Sorry. Look, I'm not trying to appoint myself chairman, I don't like that, but there's one thing that I would like to warn you against, and that is falling for the sub stuff. I've been to a few of these do's, and believe me, they always play the same game. Give him another chance. He didn't realise his debts were mounting up the way that they were, or he's been let down by other people, that sort of thing. Well, I'm telling you, forget it. There's only one thing you've got to remember, and that is that every single one of you in this room has supplied goods or services to Howard, expecting to be paid. Now, look, we trusted him then and we got out, so the trusting bit's finished, right?
Just a minute, Willie, just a minute. Now look, I came here tonight to get the best deal that I could. Yeah. Well, if waiting on a week or two means that I get a better deal, then I'm afraid that that's the way I'm going to vote.
There's not to be afraid of, lads. Them's my sentiments and all, Willie, so don't think we're all following you like flaming sheep.
Here, here.
Now, look, did I say anything about following me like sheep?
Of course you did. Now look, there's no point in us getting at each other's throats. That's not the object of the exercise.
And what is the object of the exercise, Mr. Lambert? To get our money back or to kick Alan Howard's teeth in?
Well, I'll tell you.
Look, just a minute, Sid. I'll tell you what it is, Mrs. Barlow. It's a bit of both. We won't get all our money back, that you can rely on. But that's not the end of it. Those of us who are here today have got a duty to make sure that Mr. Cleverhead never does this again. To make sure that nobody else suffers.
You know, I think he has appointed himself chairman, hasn't he?
Did you say something, Mr. Fairclough?
Oh, I was just singing, Willie.
Oh, can anybody join in?
We don't know.
Why are we waiting?
Hey, this is
Why are we waiting?
This isn't the way to do business.
Why are we waiting?
That's all right, love. Just one of those nights when everybody comes knocking on my front door.
Has Ina been by any chance?
No, to tell you the truth, she hasn't. Come to think of it, she's the only one who hasn't been. When you see her, will you tell her I'm expecting her?
Well, that's the point. I won't be seeing her. It's old time night at the over 60s, and she said she'd go with me. Well, when I called for her, she changed her mind. Said she was expecting a caller. You, don't know who it would be, do you?
Huh? I'm sorry, love, I was miles away.
Have you got a light?
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Vine, and I'm Mr. Howard's accountant. Now, you've all received a letter from me inviting you here this evening, so you know how to get in touch with me if you require any further information. And if you can't find the letter, I am in the telephone book. P.H. Vine. Now, I have before me a fairly accurate statement of Mr. Howard's liabilities and expected assets. There is a copy for each of you, and I will be handing them round a little later. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for coming and to say on behalf of my client how deeply he regrets the need for your presence here this evening. Now, as you know, we are here to discuss Mr. Howard's insolvency. Let's use the right word, shall we?
Bankruptcy's the one.
That is something that I can clear up right away, Mr. Lambert. The main purpose of this meeting this evening is to see if we can avoid Mr. Howard being proclaimed a bankrupt. There is a difference. A man is insolvent when his financial capabilities are greater than his means of meeting them. And that is Mr. Howard's position at the moment. Now, whether or not you wish to see Mr. Howard legally proclaimed bankrupt is a question of trust. Now, do you trust Mr. Howard and myself to give you a fair deal? Or would you prefer a more formal arrangement?
What exactly do you mean by a formal arrangement?
Well, I mean, Mr. Makinson, that if this meeting decides to present a petition, the courts will place Mr. Howard's affairs in the hands of the official receiver.
Quite right, too.
In other words, you will gain the full protection of the law. But of course, there are disadvantages. The costs will be higher, so you stand to get a smaller settlement. And it could take quite a long time to get it. The law is not renowned for speed.
Aye, and bankrupts aren't renowned for fair play either.
It's all right. Look, Mr. Vine has apologized to you on my behalf. So I think that's something I'd like to do for myself. I'm sorry I let my affairs get into this condition. I'm sorry I can't pay your bills. And I'm sorry it happened to be you. But I've had troubles also, you know. A lot of people owe me money.
Hey, now, what did I tell you? Almost my exact...
Do you mind? Now, all I'm asking for is a little time. Now, 3 months from now, I can pay you back. But if I'm pushed into it, I can't raise as much money as I'd like to. I want to pay you as much money as I can.
Well, that's really big of you. Most people pay a pound in a pound for what they've had, and they don't enjoy your standard of living either.
Now, I can assure you that Mr. Howard's standard of living will be affected considerably. And the fact that he's just got married won't make things any easier. But we are not asking for sympathy. All we are trying to do is to acquaint you with the facts.
Of course, I should have been there, you know. I mean, I'm entitled to know what's going on.
Why are you entitled?
Oh, she's a creditor, and she's owed money.
Oh, why, you were saying, weren't you?
How much was it exactly, Hilda? Well, it's not the amount as matters, is it?
What amount was that?
We was discussing somewhat private.
How much Alan Howard owes her?
Oh, and how much would that be?
15 shilling. Well, 15 and 3, actually.
It's not much, is it?
Well, if it's not much, why haven't he paid me then?
Oh, come on, he's in a bad way.
Well, so are we in a bad way. We're never in hotels.
That's true, I think it's a crying shame.
You're not kidding. Anyway, come on, Chuck, we can't stop in here all night. We haven't got the money what some folks have.
Ta-da. It's enough to break your heart. I nearly give her that 15 bob myself. Oh, I'll bet. Come to think of it, you know, it might not have been a bad idea. He'd have owed it me then, and there's nought like having a fella in debt to you.
You'd have been disappointed Chuck would have paid you in cash.
What makes it so sure? Well, I've been keeping my ears open. And you know, from what I've heard, he's never been short of a bob or two.
Now, you will see that the total liabilities are £5,132.17 and fourpence. And at the bottom of the page, I've listed the expected income from sales of property in Woodhouse Lane, Leeds, and Stalybridge Road, Ashton-under-Lyne. There's various furniture, stock, etc., etc. And this adds up to £14,000. But...
Aye, and it's a big button all. You just turn over.
On the other side of the sheet, you will see that both these properties are heavily mortgaged, so that the total dispersible assets are calculated to be in the region of £2,350.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Vine?
Yes, Mr. Makinson.
This Woodhouse Lane Leeds property, I see no item for the sale of fittings. Now, I understood that was a hairdressing salon, wasn't it?
No, that is a small private house owned by Mr. Howard. The Leeds salon is the property of Mrs. Dorothea Howard, Mr. Howard's divorced wife.
Aye, we're off.
Are there any further questions on the figures in front of you?
I take it we can inspect the deeds of the Leeds salon?
Yes, I think that can be arranged. Are there any more questions?
Yes. Listen, I know my arithmetic isn't all that good, but from what you say, Alan Howard owes over £5,000, but all he could lay his hands on is 2,300, is that right?
Yes, that's quite correct.
Well, doesn't that mean that we'll get less than 10 bob in the pound?
About 9 shillings, actually. And that brings me to my final point. As Mrs. Barlow puts it, my client can lay his hands on £2,300, but only if he's given time. Now, if you insist on an immediate settlement, we shall have to sell the properties at knockdown prices, and we will not be left with anything like that amount. So the choice before you is a simple one. A bad deal now, or a much better deal, we hope, in, say, 3 months' time.
Oh, well, as anywhere so far, has it? Hey, look, don't think I'm going over to their side. I mean, I want my money just as much as anybody. But if waiting for 3 months makes a difference of 2 or 3 bob in the pound, then I'm willing to wait.
Are you, Hey, let's be reasonable about this. You don't mind if I fill in a few gaps that you've left out, do you? You see, what Mr. Viner's not told you is that if we put in a petition and have Howard declared bankrupt, he'll have to pay us 10 bob in the pound before he can be discharged. Now, I take it you don't want to be an undischarged bankrupt for the rest of your life.
No, of course I don't.
Right then, the answer's easy. We take what we can now and we wait for the rest. Why should we worry about him losing a few quid on a quick sale? He's not bothered whether we get our money back or not.
But that's not true.
How do we know?
Look, all I'm asking for is a moratorium agreement. Now that means in 3 months' time I'll be able to pay you 9 shillings in the pound. But it won't stop there. After that I'll pay you every other penny of the other 11 shillings for every other pound. If I have to work my fingers to the bone to do it.
Oh, by gum, I've heard them words before.
And you can't buy out with words.
I can't stand this anymore.
I wish to make a proposition. I propose that this meeting of creditors enters into a moratorium agreement with Mr. Howard as the debtor and Mr. Vine as the unofficial trustee. The agreement to last for 3 months, at the end of which time all assets realised be properly dispersed.
Oh, you've been doing your homework, Councillor.
If I can read my shorthand, the proposition is this. That this meeting of creditors enters into a moratorium agreement with Mr. Howard, debtor, and Mr. Vine as unofficial trustee. The agreement to last 3 months, at the end of which time all assets realised should be properly dispersed. Well, could I have a seconder, please, for the motion?
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you very much. Proposed by Mr. Fairclough, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Mr. Piggott, would you like me to count the votes? Would you help me? I mean, you do have a vote yourself, of course.
Oh, yes, I'd like to very much. But not just yet. It strikes me that the councillor is up to his own tricks. You know, this isn't the town hall, councillor. You don't railroad us easily. We're not a pack of doddering old aldermen.
Well, always pay your way. That's been my motto. Neither a borrower nor a lender be.
Yeah, well, say somebody buys you a drink. What heading does that come under?
Well, that's good fellowship. That's got nothing to do with it.
Oh, I see.
And another thing I don't like either. Young lasses like that spending all their time in boozers.
Well, they're waiting for Irma. She's gone down to help our Maggie do a little bit of stock taking. Then they're going to go into town. Is that all right with you?
Well, can't they wait somewhere else? What's the matter with their own homes?
Well, perhaps they're hanging round hoping that somebody might buy them a drink. You know, there are folks like that, love.
I know. And some of them come in here.
Really strength.
Suppose it is all right if I buy a drink, is it?
I should go round to the trap shop just round the corner, Chuck.
It's not to laugh at, Betty. There'll be folks round here watching every penny I spend from now on.
Oh, don't be so daft. What are you having?
I'll have a light ale.
Have you got enough for a gin and tonic? I mean, because if you haven't, I'll buy you one.
I've got enough.
Well, then have one, you soft taper.
Now, I agree with every word Mr. Piggott said. But there's one more thing. I think we'd all be a bit more inclined to give Mr. Howard a bit of time to play with if he'd shown one scrap of goodwill. But what did he do when things started to go wrong for him? Did he tighten his belt? Did he make any effort to get his finances back on the feet again? No! I'll tell you what he did. He got married. Now, are those the responsible actions of a man in his circumstances? It doesn't take much sense to show that it isn't. And if you've got any sense, you'll vote against the proposition. Well, speaking as one of those without any sense, I'd like to make one last little item. If it was a question of Mr. Howard's sense of responsibility, I'd agree with the last speaker, but it isn't. We've got Mr. Vine there as a semi-official trustee, and we've all aired our feelings in public. So I think we can safely say that Mr. Howard won't be able to get away with in the future the things that he's got away with in the past. So that leaves us with one item, and that's to get our money back. Or as much of it as we possibly can. And the easier we make it for those two, to raise the money, then the better off we'll be. I propose the motion be put.
Will all in favour of the proposition please raise their right hands?
Are they back from that meeting yet?
Mr. Howard's? I haven't heard. It's all very unfortunate, isn't it?
Well, it's all you can expect if you don't pay your whack. Still, it's not worth ruining a life over, is it?
2 lives, Mrs. Sharples.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that. It could be the making of her. She might think she's had it rough, but she hasn't.
Oh, I don't know. She did bring 2 children up by herself.
And that's debatable on 2 counts. Whether she brought them up or whether she was ever by herself. You didn't know when the war was on. If she'd opened that front room of hers as a naffy canteen, she could have made a fortune with the customers she had. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm expecting visitors.
Oh, well, I'll go then.
That was what I was hinting at.
Of course, in my day, you know, bankruptcy were a slur. You were a social outcast in them days. Nowadays, it doesn't seem to matter. Everybody's at it.
Thanks very much, Albert. That's nice to know.
But mind, he's not by himself. Far from it.
Hello, Joe.
Oh, hello, Mrs. Howard.
Is it over?
No, not yet. I couldn't stand it. I came away.
How do you mean?
Well, they were having a go at him. Mr. Howard, you know, I mean, it's not my idea of a business meeting.
Thanks, Joe.
Ah, but don't get me wrong now, Mrs. Howard. Oh, no, I'm not on your side, neither. I've never owed anybody a penny piece in my life. And I don't see why people like us should suffer. But there are more ways than one of skinning a cat. And I didn't like the way they were doing it.
Not the end of the world, Chuck. Are you having another one? God, you might as well. I might have to ask you again.
Hi. Hi. Where are you off to?
Town, when Irma gets here.
She won't get here. She's at the meeting.
Well, I hope she's not. She said she was leaving early to do some stock taking.
Well, we'll give her 10 more minutes. I don't mind being stood up by a fella, but this is ridiculous. And talking about fellas, I want no competition from you lot. Anything over 50 is mine.
Anything over 50 you can have.
Now that just shows how much you know.
Oh, give over. What's a fella of 50 got that a fella of 20 hasn't? And don't say experience.
Who's talking about experience? Money, love. That's what he's got more of. Give him time to save up a bit and then step in and help him to spend it. Elsie will tell you, won't you, Elsie?
Elsie will tell you what?
About fellas.
How long have you got?
10 minutes.
It'd take 10 years.
That's how it gets you at her age. World weary.
Mrs. Sharples? You've got some visitors, Mrs. Sharples.
Oh, yes. Come on in. Come on in and sit you down. So, this is your mother, Tony.
I understand you wanted a word with me, Mrs. Sharples.
Yes, I did, and it was very good of you to come. And now I can't even offer you a cup of tea. Tony, would you like to run an errand for me? Nip and get me a quarter of tea from the shop at the corner of Coronation Street and Viaduct Street.
At this time?
Well, they're stock taking, but they'll open up if they know it's for me. And they know what sort I like. Off you go. Now.
You needn't have gone to all that bother, Mrs. Sharples. If you wanted a private talk, I could have sent Tony out for a little while. He's used to doing as he's told.
Yes, I've gathered that.
And before you start, Mrs. Sharples, I'd like you to know why I came here tonight. It wasn't because Tony wanted me to. I came because I thought perhaps you didn't understand the situation properly, and I ought to explain it. I'll be fair with you. I like to know what I'm up against, so I made a few inquiries. And from what I was told, you're not renowned for minding your own business.
All right, I'll admit that. But let's get one thing straight. It is not a question of knowing what you're up against. We're on the same side. We both want the best for the lad, at least I hope we do.
I'm sure we do, Mrs. Sharples. But that doesn't necessarily put us on the same side. Now, the point I want to make is this. However sincere you may be, I am Tony's mother, and the ultimate responsibility is mine. As I understand it, you want Tony to take up a musical career. I don't. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it.
Why don't you?
I have my reasons, Mrs. Sharples, but I don't think they're anything of your business.
If they're worth having, I should have thought they were worth expressing.
I must say, you're living up to your reputation, Mrs. Sharples. All right. I suppose I do owe you something. You've shown some interest in my family, which is more than anyone else has done for a long, long time.
Go on.
Has Tony spoken of his father?
He said his father died when he was a baby. He said he never knew him.
No, he never knew him, but not because he died, Mrs. Sharples. Because he left us. He walked out when Tony was 7 months old, and I've never seen or heard of him since. He was a musician, Mrs. Sharples. He played the tenor saxophone in a dance band. Had more girlfriends than I ever knew about, and one of them became more important to him than either Tony or me. So he left us.
And that's good enough for you, is it? Like father, like son, is that what you're thinking?
I'm frightened, Mrs. Sharples. I'm frightened because I don't know how much of his character Tony has inherited from his father. You see, Phil, that was my husband, he had no ambition. He could have played for any orchestra in the country, but he chose a second-rate dance band because that was the life that he wanted to live. And I've told you what happened. I wouldn't want any other girl to go through what I did.
Well, if Tony was a lad like that, it wouldn't matter whether he was a musician or a bricklayer, would it?
Well, as a bricklayer, he wouldn't be faced by the same temptations, would he?
No, perhaps not. I think I can scrape enough tea together for a couple of cups.
I'm sure you can, Mrs. Sharples.
You'd say 17 small, didn't you?
I said 7, Maggie. Wake up at the back there. We'll be here all night.
I'm sorry, love. I was thinking about Les.
I think that's enough to put anybody off, isn't it? Oh, don't take it to heart so much. It's only me and my big mouth. What's up, Maggie?
Well, I'm not sure anything's up, but... Well, I had a letter from his brother this morning. He doesn't exactly say Les is drinking again. Well, he just says he isn't so good.
Well, that's fellas. That's the way they talk. You know what it probably means? He's got a bit of a cold.
Oh,
right,
my
pals. Oh, good.
Hello, love.
Oh, excuse me, Mrs. Sharples said. Could you have a quarter of tea, please?
Smarty, she's not ill, is she?
No, it's just that my mum's with her.
Oh, I see.
Help yourself to sugar.
I don't take it, thanks.
You know, I might know more about your lad's musical tastes than you do. I take it that every time he's mentioned music to you, you've shut him up fairly quick.
And the way I felt, there was no point in talking about it.
Yes, well, I can see that. But if you had talked to him, I think you would have found that he was far more interested in classical music than aught else.
You surprised me, Mrs. Sharples. He used to spend a lot of time with his grandmother. I'm talking about my husband's mother. And I couldn't really stop him because he'd go there straight from school, and I used to work till 6:30 in the evening. Not that I wanted to stop him from going. She was good for him in some ways. She and I shared the loss, I suppose. My husband never contacted her either.
I see.
But every time I took him there, she asked him to play my husband's old favourites, and...
You know, some people do some funny things at times. Perhaps she thought it was best for all of you.
Well, I couldn't stand it. That was why we moved away from the district and came to live here. I was lucky. I found a flat very like this one over a shop in Victoria Street. I wasn't used to this kind of life before I married.
I can see that. And I'm not just interfering.
If you only knew. If you only knew how much I wanted someone to interfere. Night after night, I sat with Tony telling myself over and over again that I was doing the right thing. No one to talk to me, no one to argue with me, to advise me, no man in the house. You see, my father was an accountant. We lived very well. Very well. I was engaged to one of his junior partners, and then one night at a dance I met Phil. He was playing. He kept smiling at me. My mother and father didn't come to the wedding. I never saw either of them again.
They're both dead now. You know, you're in danger of making a martyr out of yourself, and martyrdom never brings the best out in people. Forget the past. It's over and done with. Create something with that lad of yours. Don't just stand in his way. It's a funny world. When I think of all them loving mothers queuing up to get the little others on television adverts, and here's you with a lad with a talent dripping out of his finger ends, and all he can think of is his dad's shortcomings. He's your son as well, you know.
Do you think I could have another cup of tea, Mrs. Sharples?
Yes, I think I can manage to squeeze one, lass.
Well, come on, give us a smile. The prodigal returns.
It's a bit too near the truth for my liking. What do you want, tea or coffee?
I wouldn't say no to a cup of coffee.
Where have you been all this time? I expected you ages ago.
Oh, the meeting dragged on, and I went down to the Garrick with Vine for a couple of celebration drinks.
You what?
Yes, I went down to the Garrick with Vine for a couple of celebration drinks.
Is that where you've been, drinking?
You missed the point, love. I said celebration drinks.
To celebrate what? The fact that we're up to our ears in debt?
They're not petitioning me. I've got 3 months to get my affairs right.
Well, what difference does that make?
It makes all the difference in the world, love. If they'd decided to bankrupt me, every Tom, Dick, and Harry in this town would have been breathing down my neck. It would have been official, a legal statement that I was broke. I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I wouldn't have been able to do this, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But it's unofficial. I can do anything I like. I can start up in business again tomorrow, and not one of those souls down there can do a single thing about it. Don't you understand?
Yes, I understand. But I want you to understand something. They might not be able to stop you, but I will.